and designing them is that they are a little bit more deterministic, because you've got control over what happens when someone says this or something like that, then we're going to do this. With large language models and generative AI, you don't quite have that control. It depends how you deploy them. Obviously, you can use them to enhance what you currently have, which is what we recommend. Or a lot of the examples that you see from Microsoft and Snapchat, etc., are where they're using a large language model on the front of their customer interactions. And in that world, the concern is, how do we know what conversations they're actually having and being had? How do we know whether those conversations are successful? How do we know whether this thing is kind of veering away from what we want it to, and having discussions that we don't want it to have? There's a Snapchat example where someone was pretending to be a 13-year-old girl, and it went through a whole conversation, having a conversation with the Snapchat My AI, which is, I'm meeting somebody 18 years my senior, he's taking me away for the weekend, and we're planning on having sex. And so all the way through that conversation, no alarm bells were ringing. And so it's quite easy to be caught up in the hype of this stuff's going to change the world, and isn't it all fantastic? But for a large enterprise that wants to deploy this with mission critical services and products, it takes a lot more than just throwing something to a large language model. So the concerns are, how are we going to control this? How are we going to make sure it's not having the conversations that we don't want it to have? And how are we going to make sure it's actually going to deliver value to our business?
So it's sort of the classic senior leader CXO, that sort of, what's the impact going to be? Where's the value? But also, how do we put the rail guards around it as well? As with any technology, how can it be abused? And how do we rail guard against that, so it protects, one, the company, but also that we're still getting the value back, and we're not actually going into litigation or a law case that's now going to take any value away whatsoever.
Exactly. Or even just reputational, like if you've got something that can't even hold a conversation, doesn't understand the basic mechanics of a conversation, then you're going to look stupid. Companies have looked stupid for the last 10 years that have deployed this stuff poorly, like PayPal's first chatbot that said, when someone said, I've been scammed, and it responded, great. It's not life or death situation. Although it's important enough for that person, they need to switch that channel and use a different channel where they can actually get that issue resolved. So it is an issue for them in that moment, but it's not it's a reputational thing more than anything. And so that's kind of, it's always the case, is that if you deploy it poorly, you run the risk of it. It can have significant damage, but even on the lower end, you don't really want people having poor conversations that leads people to believe that your company just doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's that brand management, isn't it? But also it sort of then leads down a funnel of, I can't talk to any humans, I can't talk to anybody, I can't even talk to this AI bot. So actually, why am I dealing with you as a brand? Because you just don't care about me as a customer, because you're just you're putting so much friction in front of it that actually I'm just going to go elsewhere. It's a whole lot simpler.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many times have people done that? Everyone does that. Can't be bothered with this. I'd rather just not bother.
Yeah, no, exactly. And sort of leading on to that as well. So let's sort of take that a little bit further. So you've been working with businesses for the last sort of 5-10 years over this sort of period of time, working with different organizational structures and different business units. And in terms of, from your perspective, what do you think, or what do you see being the most sort of significant impact that AI will have in the short term? Or we'll say the short term could be anything like 2 days, 2 months, or 2 years. It's happening so quickly, isn't it? But on the sort of looking at the organizational units, and you can talk about them all or select some of them, but things like sales, customer service, customer satisfaction, marketing in particular, because that seems like where you're very much focused. What do you see as being your perspective on that significant impact in the short term period?
Yeah. The interesting thing right now is that for the first time, really, the tools are being put in the hands of ordinary people. So up until ChatGPT, for example, if you wanted to utilize any kind of AI, whether it's natural language understanding or a large language model of some description, you need to know how to code. You need to fire up the APIs, and not just code, but you need to be able to build the infrastructure that's going to be able to manage the conversation. You need dialogue management, you need channel integrations, you need content integrations, business system integrations, you need all this kind of stuff, memory, reasoning, all this kind of things that you need to build basically before you even put the natural language part into it. So the value it's been delivering is very much there, but it has required a lot more effort. There's now tools and technologies and platforms that exist now that make all of that stuff easier, but still it hasn't put it in the hands of the average person. It puts it in the hands of customers or what have you. But in terms of like somebody who just works in marketing, Now, all of a sudden, they've got access to a pretty powerful AI engine. And so the most immediate things that you'll see straight, I can't remember exactly who it was that did the study now, but there was might have been McKinsey that did a study that found that 37 or 38% of marketers are already using generative AI on a day-to-day basis. So it's very clear to see how roles like that, where you're responsible for generating a lot of content anyway, that's going to have a huge impact on your day to day, because you can start using this. We use it for our content for email outlines, subject lines. We use it for summarizing video transcripts into social media posts. We feed it podcast transcripts, get it to write articles and blogs for us. Now, the issue with it is that actually it's okay at that, but there's a lot of massaging that needs to be done to get it to be effective. And so, but it's almost like a stepping stone. So I think that's definitely an immediate benefit that we'll all see, is that people can now use AI every day, day to day, to streamline some of the tasks that usually take them a long time. And when you get used to using things like a voice user interface, like I very rarely type stuff now. I dictate emails, I dictate all my text messages. And what we'll find is, I think that people's mental model is going to shift. So to get to the point where they feel some resistance when it comes to doing things like that, feeling a bit of resistance when it comes to typing an email or writing an article, because they're so used to having this tool available to them that's going to give them a jump start. So that's the kind of immediate difference. But if you think about it from a business perspective, rather than the employees working within the business, if you think about it from an organizational perspective, what's happened is that the technology's existed and has been, production ready and proven, with lots of examples of it working really, really effectively. It's there and ready to have real conversations at scale with customers around mission critical services and products and use cases, right? It's already been there for a long time. What ChatGPT and OpenAI have managed to do is, through putting it in the hands of an ordinary person, they've raised the profile of the technology to everybody. So now business leaders are thinking, well, okay, if I can use that for writing an email, what's it going to mean for our customer relationships? So I think actually what we're going to see, and we've already seen this in this year, is that all of the people like me who've been designing, implementing, and managing conversational automation programs and experiences over the last half decade, we're finding now that everyone's knocking on our door saying we want our own version of ChatGPT, which, when you dig deeper, they don't really want their own version of ChatGPT. What they want is a abstracted brain, an abstracted version of their business that's able to have conversations with customers. Sometimes you might want to use a large language model. Sometimes you might want to use an intent-based language model. The technology that you use is not the problem. It is not really important. What matters is now businesses are thinking, how do we have conversations with customers? Because if you can build that abstracted brain, and you can build it well and design it well, you can put that into WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, Google My Business, on your website, in your app, in your contact center, over the phone lines. It could be a voice user interface on your mobile app. The opportunities are endless. Once you've built it, you can deploy it wherever you need it to be deployed. So I think the short term for businesses in terms of customer relationships is, I just genuinely think we're going to see an awful lot more of conversational automation.
And it's interesting you touch upon a point there that I've not sort of thought about before, but in terms of deploying your own model, so I was just playing with Llama 2, depending on when we release this, but that just came out today. A16Z, I've just putting it up there and just playing around. So suddenly businesses have got this option of bringing large language models into their platform internally and bringing their own data, and it's isolated. And what do you think the impact will be on operations and IT? Because suddenly we're in a different world of, I'll plug my CRM in and I've got some APIs and I manage this. And suddenly it's like, now everybody's a data scientist. Everybody has got these skill sets. And do you think we're in that cusp again of IT are going to feel, oh, my job's at risk, or the company's at risk, or is it going to create some different dynamics in organizations moving forward?
It will. I think we're a bit early for that for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons is that because large language models, they've been around for a long time, they've been used for a long time. But if you look at any successful deployment of a large language model, it always comes with supplementary and ancillary technology. Arguably, actually, a large language model is an ancillary technology to conversational technologies in general, which plugs into the mix to make conversations more effective, as opposed to being the governing and driving force. The quality assurance at the moment on large language models is lacking, only because of how kind of newly adopted people are putting them into lots of different use cases. So they have the potential, of course, to be able to, I mean, you could feed it an instruction, ask it to turn that instruction into a series of steps, and then ask it to generate prompts that would enable it to fulfill those steps, give it access to various APIs and have it run away and go ahead and do it. The issue is that a large language model has absolutely zero context over your business, no idea about your business processes, your policies, your rules, and all that kind of stuff. And so, yes, you could give it that information if you've written it all down, but you've got no way right now of actually monitoring the output. It's fine if you're testing Llama and it's you and you're kind of having to play around with it, or a developer's spinning up something in the bedroom, or your innovation team are doing something like that. But you try having 4,000 conversations concurrently around a specific use case, and everything's being managed by a large language model. You're going to find that, if you don't have some quality assurance there, you have no idea what's going on. And so I think the tools at the moment are getting there, but they're just a bit too primitive for that to happen. But yeah, I think that not just IT, but there's a lot of departments who will be kind of, having various concerns and worries about this technology in terms of what's it going to do for jobs and that kind of stuff. But it's essentially a productivity tool. That's the way I view it. And we've had productivity advancements in every single generation, going from typewriters to computers, from computers to mobile, from mobile to now kind of software, basically, very highly powerful software. You always have these productivity gains. So I think that businesses and business units should be thinking, well, how can I use this to streamline some of the stuff that I don't like to do? How can I use it to get rid of some of the stuff that's a really kind of like boring part of my job? Or even how can I use it to do the bits of the job that I enjoy, but do it better or do it to more scale? If you look at, there's a really great graphic, which I show every now and then, which is looking at financial companies, FSI businesses, and their customer to employee ratio. And all of the big companies in the UK, they've all got like between a 400 and 1,500 customer to staff ratio. So that's 1,500 customers to one member of staff. You look at China, Alibaba Group, they've got 150,000 customers per single employee. And that's because they've invested heavily in technology, not just generative and large language models, but AI technologies in general and automation technologies in general. And so, the key for all of this stuff is that I view large language models as part of a mix, which if you utilize the whole suite of technologies effectively, you can accomplish some really, really special stuff. So I find it exciting rather than threatening.
And it is interesting, the whole ethos around sort of STEAM AI and the event is the Industrial Revolution. So STEAM, or power in a sense, changed the dynamics. There was a whole revolt. It's like, oh my God, no, let's go and smash those machines up. But then, like you say, it made lives better, it improved lives, and different jobs, different tasks came along rather than just people doing the same mundane things daily. So it does make an impact. I think it's just sort of that thinking about that strategy and how you implement it, and like you say, taking learning steps, because again, it does impact. So, right, okay, we're going to do X, Y, Z. What does that mean from a legal perspective? What does that mean from a human resources perspective? It's going across all business units. It's not just we're going to deploy this solution in the sales team. Fantastic. But actually, if we've got an AI bot that's talking to customers, it's doing outbound calls, can it swear? Can it be hacked? Can it be introduced to do X, Y, Z? What's the legalities if somebody's, what happens in this instance, sort of thing. So which your agents are trained for, but not necessarily the bot is trained for every situation.
Yeah, I mean, but it should be. That's the thing. Like, so if you're going to create an assistant, you absolutely want to design a persona, which is the tone, the character, the way that it interacts with customers. So you absolutely need to do that, because if you don't do that, then every customer that interacts with an inconsistent assistant is going to have a different experience of it, and therefore a different experience of your company. So you need to design a persona and a personality first, and you need to stick to that in all your interactions across all channels, which is critical. The second thing around it is we don't advise today that companies do what Snapchat has done, which is have a large language model on the front end of conversations with customers. Large language models are better placed as supplementary to an existing conversational automation stack. So if you think about having conversations with customers, let's take a chatbot, right? Someone goes to your website, they open up a chatbot and the chatbot says, how can I help? And they say, I've lost my credit card. What you don't want is necessarily a large language model being responsible for what goes back to the customer in that instance. You can use the large language model to enhance the quality of the classification of that utterance. So we think that this is a lost credit card utterance intent. Let's throw that to a large language model, see if it agrees. Yes, I do agree. It's got a 99% chance of that being the case. Okay, so let's do that. Now what needs to happen is it needs to go to some context management. We call it dialogue management, which is when someone says this, what needs to happen. And you don't want to throw what needs to happen to a large language model. Even if you can write down all of your business rules and logic and put it all in loads of documentation and give it access to that, you still don't want that, because it's going to pick out little segments and then try and summarize. You need it to follow specific rules. So you need context and dialogue management. So when it recognizes this is a lost credit card intent, the dialogue management needs to say what needs to be done now. And that's the thing that will integrate with line of business systems and all of those kind of things. And then when it comes to generating the response, sometimes you might want a large language model to be involved in that. For example, if it's not an action, like a transaction, but it's an information-based question, then yeah, fine. Have a suite of documents with a vector database over the top, pull out all the relevant sources, send that to the language model, get it to summarize, and then send that response back. That's fair enough. But when you're dealing with like mission critical or highly consequential use cases that have got very specific business rules, large language models are complementary to help enhance the conversation rather than guiding the conversation. So this is the misconception that people have, which is that large language models need to be up front and center. They're the things that are going to govern all of this kind of stuff. But businesses have processes, they have rules, they have policies, and large language models, unfortunately, are not going to follow those policies. You need to be able to build that separately and have the language model enhance that experience where it's best at.
Yeah, they have businesses are complex ecosystems, aren't they? Most definitely in sort of transient changes. And moving on from that then, so in terms of what would you say your recommendations are for a CXO or a business leader at the moment to prepare themselves and their business to maximize the potential to leverage AI? So like we say, there's lots of models that are moving forward, there's lots of changes happening and such, but how can they best prepare? What would you say, sort of giving them some sound bites?
Yeah. It depends where they are in their journey. So different companies are going to be in different stages. If you've got nothing today, no AI solutions whatsoever, I would say the most critical step, and this stuff just doesn't change. It doesn't matter if there's large language models or generative AI, whatever. And this is probably nothing new. If you've got nothing whatsoever, the first thing you need to do is figure out like what are the business problems or customer problems that need to be solved. Simple as that. And then from there, you can decide what your use cases are. If you've got long wait times in your contact center, there's a problem. Let's maybe think about a solution. If you're having a lot of switching between agents and people are being passed around all the time, that's a problem. Now let's think of a solution. If you've got website traffic and the abandon rate's high, or people are switching from the website to the call center, then there's an opportunity to fix the website. So where's the problem you're trying to solve? And then what's the solution for that problem is the first kind of step. And if you can figure out what the solution is, let's say, for example, you've got long wait times on your call center. So you want to introduce something that's going to shorten those wait times, which might be automating some conversations. So the next thing is, well, where we're going to get data from that is going to tell us what conversations we need to automate first. And there's a lot of analysis you can do. You can use large language model for some of that. There's some very proven technologies that you can use to do topic modeling and stuff like that right now. So you can basically profile what conversations are we having? What conversations do we need to have? You can do the same with the live chat if you've got that. You can do the same on your website. There's data in your emails, there's data on your web search, there's data everywhere, essentially. So if you can figure out what conversations you need to have, and then start with one conversation. You don't need to boil the ocean. What the marketing teams of these LLM companies are very good at is saying, give us all of your data and we'll answer all of your questions. Whereas that really is a recipe for disaster at scale, because without quality assurance, you've got no idea whether those questions are being answered successfully. You're far better off finding a specific use case and trying to solve that specific use case, because what that's going to enable you to do is, even if you outsource it, I recommend that people partner rather than outsource, because this technology is definitely, is it going to go away tomorrow? No, it's not going to go anywhere. This technology is going to exist for the rest of our lives. And so if a business wants to utilize it, the best thing they can do is gear themselves up to give themselves the capabilities internally to be able to utilize it. That's the technology capabilities internally and the skill sets internally, because you don't want to be always relying on a Microsoft or an OpenAI or another system integrator or a vendor, because you've got no control over anything. You want to in-house it as much as you can. So if you find a use case, use data to figure out what use case you need to start with. And then the most important thing is to just start. And again, you might want to partner in that first stages, because the trick is, yes, you want to demonstrate value, and ideally you want to start with a use case that's got a proven track record. You don't want to start building something from scratch that's never been done before, because it's going to take you forever. Is there a comparable in another industry that we can point to and say that's similar? We know the technology works there. Let's do it. Automating IVRs, for example, perfect example. And then as you go through the process of design, you go through the process of implementation, the next path is deployment and then optimization. And optimization is a part that everyone kind of misses out on. They believe that when you go live with these things, it's like a website. You just put it live and that's it. Whereas the reality is it's more like employing someone. When you go live, it's almost like their first day on the job. And you would never just put somebody on the job, give them a phone and say make some sales calls and just leave them there for the rest of their time at the company. You would never do that. And so think of it in the same way. You've got a digital employee and you're now responsible for training and managing and looking after it. And so those are the two things I suppose to summarize and make that easily digestible. I would say, first of all, figure out somewhere to start because you're going to have to start somewhere. And secondly, do the things required to start building internal capabilities around this technology.
I like that point at the end. I know valid points overall, but I've not thought of it that way. And so it's sort of how I talk to people about sort of channel sales as well is when you employ a salesperson or an employee, you give them a handbook, they get started, and then you do a review with them. How are you performing? And then as you go through life, you get promoted. And it's a good simile with that aspect of you deploy something and a lot of IT projects go wrong from the optimization or review side. It's like, it's done now. We've got a CRM system. Salesforce is in. Thanks a lot. Bye. See you later. And it's like, no, you need to come back and revisit that and sort of make sure it's working okay. And actually, like you say, is it meeting the business needs now? Because we deployed it 6 months ago, but the business needs may have changed. It may be that actually it's answering this stuff, but now what we've realized we can do a whole lot more with it, but revisit. And I think that similarly with that training employees is a great soundbite there. It just sort of sums it up.
Think of it this way, like, unlike a website or a CRM or something like that, you're having a different conversation every single time. So imagine having 1,000 different conversations across a week, right? If you don't have tools to be able to analyze those conversations and say, broadly speaking, where is this thing going wrong? Then you're never going to know. You're just going to have disappointed customers. That's why there's so many poor chatbots out there, because people deploy them, they think that's done, wipe their hands with it, and off they go. It's even more intense than deploying a CRM or something like that, because you have no choice but to, on a weekly basis, make sure that things are being optimized. There's language changes. 3 years ago, nobody knew what the name COVID was. All of a sudden, mortgage companies, banks, governments, everyone's now talking to chatbots saying, what am I doing about COVID? And so if you're not on top of it quickly, it's going to fall down. And the other kind of thing is, if you imagine a world where, like, think of every single channel that a business has, every single place where a customer meets a business, right? You've got in person or in store, you've got website, app, social, messaging, potentially like smart speakers and stuff like that, emerging channels, metaverse, etc. Contact center, phone, you've got chat. All of those places, they're all conversational. Every single one of them is conversational. And so we have this scale framework, which is the journey that a lot of companies are on, which is, first, I mentioned getting yourself set up right, making sure you've got the internal capabilities you need to deliver. Second is getting coverage across your use cases, making sure that your assistant can cover everything that your business does. Third thing is access, making sure that it's accessible across all of your channels. Every single channel where your customers are at, make sure it's there. Doesn't have to resolve their issue in that channel, might kind of point them to the better channel to resolve that issue, but make sure you're there, right? The next one is lift, which is getting access, increasing your access, which naturally comes through channel deployments and use case coverage, but there's also ways through marketing, promotion, behavior change, and stuff like that you can increase adoption. And the third is evaluate, which is the optimization part, and that feeds and drives everything else. If you follow that framework, like Capital One is, like Lloyd's Banking Group is, like all of these kind of like forward-thinking companies are doing, what you end up with is everything your business does. No one's at this point yet, but this is the way we're going. Everything your business does, right across the customer journey, from research down to interest, down to sales, down to waiting for the goods to arrive, down to using the goods, getting support with the goods and leaving. Every single one of those points of the journey, and that's the same for most businesses, across every single touch point that you have with your customers, across all your business use cases, you're having conversations. At that point, conversation becomes the first point of contact for your business. Therefore, AI becomes the first point of contact for your business. Therefore, all of your customer interactions predominantly over time will become at first AI mediated. And there's no way you're going to have success in that environment. And this is what customers are going to expect as well. There's no way you're going to have success in that environment if you don't have internal capabilities, very, very sound analytics, and a very good design practice and development practice. And if you're not on top of it, optimizing it, constantly tuning it, then yeah, it's not gonna it's not gonna happen. You can't just fire and forget.
And I think it also anchors back to what we've been talking about for a long time across all businesses, whether you're an IT firm, an engineering firm, manufacturing, whatever it is. You know, digital transformation, buzzword bingo, whatever we call it, it's basically about revisiting your business and looking at where it is now, where you want to be in the future, and have a forward-looking plan. I think, again, I'd sort of like your opinion on, what do you think the long term looks like for AI? A 5-year view for businesses now. We're thinking, right, okay, we're going to build a strategy. What we're going to do over the next 5 years. What do you think that sort of long term looks like for businesses in general?
That's kind of almost what I outlined, which is it's going to become more prevalent. And as it starts to become more prevalent and it proves value, this is the natural journey that businesses have been on for a while. Those have been investing in this stuff. They've been on this journey a while. What they tend to start with is we've got this kind of like use case maturity framework, which starts out with deflecting use cases. And that's what most companies do. That's where they start. They don't want to have people contact humans. They don't have customers contact humans. So they want to deflect calls, right? Or they want to deflect sales opportunities until the person's qualified or whatever it might be. And so those questions are all FAQs basically. And this is where large language models are right now. In like those that are deploying large language models, most of them that are doing it successfully are actually doing it internally. But for the easy common use case, which everyone's, every AI system you look at has got a way of feeding in data and it'll deliver you a FAQ bot. That's the deflecting use cases. That's the first stage of maturity. After that, you'll move into interpreting use cases. And in order to interpret, you need to be able to understand not necessarily what question needs to be answered, but what action is the person trying to take. And so a good example of an interpreting use case would be someone calls up your contact center and says, I need to change my address on my policy. You interpret that as change of address. Okay, what's the best thing to do? Best thing to do is route it to this department here. Right. So let's route it to that department. You might even have some verification in there. So, okay, so you're calling off this mobile number. Is that Kane? Is that Stuart? Like, yes, it is. Okay. So and in that case, you're retrieving data from a line of business system, right? You're just putting information into the conversation, putting data. That's interpreting. Then you're moving to transacting. And this is where it starts to add sort of like real business value. You're not just moving
I'm just
people.
going to stop you there because we're going to get cut off. So
Right.
if you remember, we're transacting.
Transacting. All right. Yeah.
Transacting. And then
Right.
what we'll do is it will literally just cut us off. I may have to wait 5 minutes to jump back on again.
All right.
And then we'll take it from the
Is
transacting.
Same link.
Yeah. And it'll just keep that flow going for that sort of final segment piece around that aspect.
That's cool.
So you're gonna have to